Hello and welcome to Inside the Pod. The latest DEFRA land use figures have been published and they show a reduction in the bean area of 37% for 2024. That can't be right, or can it? We ask Andy Berry from Frontier for his views. What might bumper yields mean for the trading environment for pulses this autumn? We'll take a look at the pulse market update from PGRO and see what you think of that. And then we'll have news about a special conference taking place in January, which you need to put in the diary, and some astonishing yields in Dorset to tell you about. Let's start with the main talking point in the PGRO's October Pulse Market Update, which came out this week. So if you haven't been studying the DEFRA website for the latest land use figures, they have been published. They show for field beans a reduction of 37% in the area drilled and harvested in 2024. That's down from 210,000 hectares to 131,000 hectares. And for peas, we see a 46% increase, according to the statistics, from 60,000 hectares to 87,500 hectares. Now, the trade has long suspected that there will be a fall in the bean crop area, initiated by the poor winter and spring drilling opportunities at the turn of the year. But the dramatic drop in the bean area suggested will have exceeded the forecast of most. Equally, there's some incredulity at the declared area for peas, with many believing that the area is considerably overestimated. On the face of it, it would seem to indicate a potential drop in available beans, but we all know that the average yield of both peas and beans was significantly up in the previous two harvests. To try and make a bit of sense of this, we'll have a word with somebody who knows their beans from their peas. So I'm joined now by Andy Berry from Frontier, who's been in the industry for many years and will actually shortly be retiring. I understand, Andy. You're looking forward to that. But before you go, we thought we would just ask you for your opinion on the latest pulse market update from PGRO, because when it's been put together, perhaps the headline at the top of the reports is around the fairly significant drop in DEFRA statistics of the field bean area from 210,000 hectares down to 131, and an increase in the pea area from 60 to 87,000. So from your point of view, how accurate are those figures?
Thanks, Ben. Always have a lot of uncertainty about the DEFRA numbers. Statistically, they're not overly confident in those numbers anyway. They only give a one-tick statistical confidence in it. So looking through in a little bit more detail from, I think, a much more commercial view, would certainly agree a reduction in the acreage this year, obviously due to the real problems last winter of winter bean planting, and spring beans were so late drilled, and a lot of area was taken up with spring oats and barley. But that said, I think we put together some numbers which would reflect a winter bean acreage somewhere in the region of 90,000 hectares for this harvest we've just had, and somewhere approximately for 75,000 of spring beans. So our combined figure would then give us an overall hectarage of beans of 165,000, which is down from the 210, but certainly substantially more than the DEFRA 130 number. And then peas are very, very difficult because it's such a small acreage, and it's hard for most people to actually come up with reasoned arguments why there'd be big increases or decreases. I certainly don't believe this massive leap from 60 to 87. And for the starting point, I would say we probably work on unchanged at 60. So if you look at the combined peas and beans from our view, we'd be looking at 225,000 hectares, which is actually, quite amusingly, if you add up the DEFRA numbers, which we completely disagree with, but is actually a very similar total number. So I hope that's given it a little bit of rationale. Some people may or may not disagree, but I think that's a fair starting point from an industry point of view anyway.
Yeah, I think we've always treated the DEFRA figures with a little pinch of salt, because, like you say, statistically a small area, and the confidence in it isn't always great from the trade and throughout the industry. So there's always that caveat. You've talked a little bit there about how the weather around drilling affected the amount of peas and beans that went in the ground. I think in previous news articles, we've talked a lot about the impact of the sustainable farming incentive in people opting to take SFI options rather than planting pulses. How much of an impact do you think that's had on the planted area? When we've talked about weather, but how much do you think SFI is impacting that?
I think certainly there's absolutely no doubt of an impact of the SFI in some way going towards reducing the planted acres. And my side comment from that would be it's incredibly disappointing that the new SFI regulations do not in any way, shape or form include pulses, which seems the most ridiculous idea from DEFRA not to include them, but that's my personal view. But yes, certainly we have noted that the increase in SFI has made a particular dent in pulses. However, I still think that the area of pulses, even at the numbers I've given, with beans at 165, I think the farmers who continue to grow beans and peas recognise the value both from a commercial point of view and also the benefit from the following crop in terms of the nitrogen fixation. And so I don't expect that number to fall. In fact, we'll be more confident in saying, providing drilling conditions allow, I would think going forward in subsequent years, we would see this being a relatively low number and in fact increasing as we go forward.
I think that's an important point. And if you look back over the statistics on planted areas, certainly of beans over the years, there is a general trend for more beans going in the ground, isn't there? The DEFRA data that we're looking at goes back, I think, to the 80s, to sort of getting on for 40 odd years, and it shows an increase in the bean area. So is that a positive trend that we shouldn't? We're talking here about perhaps a drop in the area a little bit potentially, but debatable. But actually, is the longer term trend a fairly positive one?
I absolutely think it is, and certainly with the much more interest in the environment and the reduction or attempted reducing of the dependence on imported proteins such as soybean meal. This story is been a very slow burner in terms of the pulse industry uptake, but it's absolutely part and parcel of a lot of discussions now with end users and consumers. And we are beginning to see that reflect through, whether that's in commercial companies recognizing the natural capital of pulse crops particularly, and certainly from an animal feed point of view, the increased consumption of pulses, with the caveat, of course, that they have to be price competitive. And this trading year for the last 6 months, as beans remained relatively high and other raw materials came down, then unfortunately the inclusion of beans into animal feed rations has reduced. But I think it's a blip, and I think long term we will expect to see the crop area grow. We'll expect to see the demand domestically of pulses grow and also into Europe. And whilst I might not be around trading it, I fully expect one day to have a 1 million ton bean crop in the UK. So that's the holy grail that we should be heading for. And I don't think it's unrealistic to look at that as an overall volume.
Well, that feels like a very positive note to end on, Andy. So thank you for your time today. And if we don't speak again before you retire, on behalf of PGRO and I'm sure many others in the industry, thank you for your passion and your enthusiasm for the sector, which has certainly been appreciated over the years. Okay,
that's great. Thanks, Ben. Well, I'm not off straight away, so I'll be around to haunt people for a little bit longer yet. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Look forward to being haunted. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So as Andy's outlined there, some innate skepticism over the figures. And I think looking back over the statistics for the past 40 years, they're never exactly right. So need to be taken with a pinch of salt. But this is not really helpful for trading when trying to judge available supply against demand. And we now find ourselves up against the window for winter bean drilling. So far, winter bean seed sales appear to be significantly down. But whether this is due to planting decisions, farm saved seed, over-year seed from intended 2023 sowing, or a selection of alternative options for cropping land, such as the SFI, not a lot is known. There was a lot of uncertainty, not only for the outcome of crop 2024, but also the prospects for the 2025 crop area. Let's start with a look at feed beans. The newly issued crop area figures do nothing to clarify the availability forecast, but perhaps nudge in the right direction of those anticipating the lower range expressed in the last bulletin. We said nearer to 500,000 tonnes than 620,000 tonnes might be expected. There is little external export demand to Europe, with buyers either making alternative protein purchases, having viewed UK-sourced beans as too dear, or simply waiting to see what happens in the general commodity market, securing requirements on a hand-to-mouth basis. Delays to the implementation of soy importation restriction in Europe have also weighed in on the actions of buyers. Bean prices have remained remarkably stable since harvest, and even the recent rally in wheat values has had little impact on the bean offering. UK demand is also slow, though. The inclusion of beans in compound feed is down 50%, as we've just heard from Andy, compared to this time last year. The higher prices of a few weeks ago are stimulating buyer interest in cheaper alternatives, such as rape meal, DDGS, and even palm kernel expellers, PKE. Competitive bean offers were slow to materialise, and the later harvest crops were wetter, needed drying, and were consequently delayed reaching the market. Buyers in general lack enthusiasm, and growers equally seem to have their attention elsewhere, perhaps focusing on autumn drilling and even some more northern locations, the remnants of harvest. Traders are not finding selling easy, so realistically, speculating on offers of £210 to £215 a tonne ex-farm might be obtained, depending on location. In terms of export beans for human consumption, the market has been fairly slow, but the Egyptian market is now open to business, having had significant carryover of old crop Australian produce. The Australian crop has not been without difficulties this year, and while anticipated to be of a similar size, the southern crop is considered relatively poor. Australian harvest of northern bean crops starts in October, but traditionally it's the southern region that has been the main source of exports, and the potential need for extended internal shipment from the north may mean a 3-month delivery time to Egyptian buyers. This has the effect of extending the potential European window for a little. The early Egyptian market trades have been dominated by suppliers from the Baltic region, with early cargoes having started to arrive this month. Quality of these shipments has not been as high as previously expected, and this leaves some room for optimism. That said, the importers are now much better equipped to clean upon arrival and can split dress cargoes for different local markets, removing some of the perceived value. That said, good quality will always sell, and a premium over feed beans of £20 to £30 a tonne might be realised for good visual samples with low insect damage and low staining. Samples of UK combining peas received by the trade to date have generally been of good colour with lower levels of bleaching, although some of the later harvested crops have lower quality, suffering from greater incidence of waste and stain. In general, yields have been much improved, and with that in mind, the trade has been concentrating on servicing growers with production contracts. Most peas are currently grown on contract, and there are various clauses for quality, and values are predetermined. Let's have a look at some of them. Starting with green peas, micronizers have continued to lead this market when in need, demanding the best visual quality and being prepared to pay for it. But as buyers, they are not ever present, and more regularly, prices of around £325 to £365 a tonne have been realised, depending on appearance and cooking qualities. Contracts for crop 2025 are available, offered on variously negotiated ex-farm bases. Typically, they might achieve £300 a tonne minimum and a maximum of £400 a tonne, or alternatively on fixed prices with bonus options at values in between. UK Marifat peas and yield and quality from 2024 has generally been good, but from a trading perspective, this market remains under great pressure. Alternative supplies are making their way from Canada into the eastern markets at comparatively lower prices. The £500 a tonne plus ex-farm value that many producers have recently assumed as an expectation is now coming under pressure. Contracting for Marifat pea production for crop 2025 has largely paused until a more certain picture on availability is realised. If you're interested, we advise you speak to your merchant. Yellow peas now, and they find themselves in surplus under pressure from imports and international trades, and a range of between £320 to £350 a tonne can be expected, with the higher values being for superb looking samples with niche buyer interests such as bird feed specialists. Despite the fact that yellow peas are the leading subject of alternative flour and protein processors, so far that market has failed to significantly develop in the UK. Contracts have been available for 2025 crop, but at the low end, and those interested should contact their merchant directly. And finally, maple peas. Demand continues to be strong and supply weak. As a result, prices of up to £450 a tonne ex-farm might be achieved. The variety Mantara has tended to yield higher than the variety Rose, but when available, Rose carries a human consumption value premium, with Mantara being a pigeon feed buyer's favourite. Crop 2025 contracts are likely to be realised in the coming weeks and may be at or around current market values. Again, contact your merchant if you're interested at this stage. If you wanted to double check any figures, the PGRO's website is where you need to go. That's where the Pulse Market Update has been published. And if you sign up to receive this in your inboxes, it'll be sent to you every time the PGRO publishes a new one. So we'll just finish with a little bit of news. Those who are following the progress of the Nitrogen Climate Smart project, of which PGRO is the project lead, a conference is going to be held in Peterborough on January the 22nd. That'll be an opportunity to hear about all of the latest projects that have been undertaken by partners who are involved in that work, hear some progress and learn about what the future might look like for those who want to increase the amount of homegrown pulses used throughout the supply chain here in the UK. So one to look out for there and to mark into your diaries for next year. That's it for today. Join us next time where we'll be talking to Agravista agronomist Todd Jex, who's seen some remarkable yields of beans down in Dorset, where he advises on farms. He's seen some yields of over 8.2 tonnes a hectare. So we've asked him why, how he's done that, what the farmers have done differently, and hopefully he'll be able to give us some pearls of wisdom so we can all maintain this excellent yield performance that we've seen across many farms over the past 12 months. So that's it for today. If you want to keep up to date with Inside the Pod episodes, make sure you hit the subscribe button and it'll be downloaded to your phone as soon as there's a new episode available. Bye for now.